Hi, I'm making a climate change video again, even though I made a few months ago, but, well, one of them I was really angry because I am in despair. I'm exasperated, and I'm exasperated with the dilutions of the truth, the lies covering the truth, the half-truths, burying the very serious truth, you know, and it's all peekaboo, isn't it? And people are getting very, very, very confused. Now, yet again, I have an issue with Corbett, with James Corbett of the Corbett report, because he's put this video out and he's basically poo-pooing the former UN climate chief Christiana Figueres about her warning that the next 3 years will be crucial to stopping the worst effects of global warming. I mean, what she's talking about here is that within 3 years, it is very likely, if we don't make some drastic changes now, we're going to be past the point of no return. We are going to not be able to do anything at all except face the approaching disaster and catastrophe. Now, again, they are stifled, the UN. We know that. We know they're compromised. So, you know, they're not saying the real threat. They're still harping on about CO2. Everybody knows that CO2 is the red herring. Because the real threat here is methane. Yes, methane is a carbon gas, but it is 100 times more potent in the first 2 years. Okay, in the first year, it's 100 times more potent, measure per measure, with CO2 that's, you know, pumped out of car fumes, etc. And it has a vastly more rapid warming effect of our planet than regular CO2. Now, one of the big emitters of CO2 is livestock, the animal food industry. Okay? And the thing is that it really wouldn't be a problem if we didn't have 8 billion people on the planet. Okay? Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having 8 billion people on the planet. This planet needs every hand it can get to sort out the mess that the crazy monsters have left in their, you know, lust for gold and whatever else it is that takes their fancy. But the thing is when you've got 8 billion people eating, all demanding a meat and dairy diet, that's a serious problem. Because animal farming, including even growing the food to feed it, people don't realise how much grain stocks these animals eat. They produce methane. There's massive amounts of methane being produced purely from animal farming. But yes, astonishingly, if Americans could just cut back on animal foods by half, the effect on greenhouse gas emissions would be like garaging all US motor vehicles and vessels for as long as we keep our consumption down. Well, I would say don't cut it by half. I'd say, you know, reduce your meat intake to a quarter if you really must eat it. Or go vegan. I've been vegan for 25 years. I can tell you now, it's a healthy way to live. Now, for those that still don't really get what I'm saying, this is an article by Gary Hauser, who's talking about killer methane that could erupt from the Arctic. And Peter Wadhams has written the foreword and endorsement. On top of the carbon dioxide threat, a further greenhouse gas threat looms: the prospect of large releases of methane from offshore sediments on Arctic continental shelves. This is an outcome of the retreat of sea ice, which allows coastal waters to warm up and degrade the offshore permafrost. This threat, all too clear in the photographic evidence of methane emissions obtained by Russian expeditions, could greatly accelerate global warming and add further enormous costs to the planet's burden. Only immediate drastic action can avert a catastrophic worsening of our climatic plight. I support this commentary by Gary Hauser. Now, this was written in 2013, and it was in 2013 that this lady, Dr. Natalia Shakhova, gave her interview at the European Geophysical Union, which was in Vienna in 2012. So it was, sorry, this was published on 2013. So I'm just going to play you a little bit of what she's saying here.
Investigation the methane issue in the Arctic in 90s of the last century, and we started from the terrestrial ecosystem, freshwater ecosystem, and then about 8 years ago switched to studying the Siberian Arctic shelf, and actually been studying it for the last 8 years continuously, year by year by year, conducting 1 or 2 expeditions a year. The hydrocarbons are produced within the sedimentary drain was sealed. It was not released for thousands of years during that time when the subsea permafrost sealed these deposits and prevented the methane escape to the atmosphere. That is why we are telling that this should be the largest hydrocarbon stock in the world over there. The methane hydrate is not a specific type of source of methane. It's just a reservoir to temporarily preserve the methane of any kind. There should be a natural gas, the thermogenic, the biogenic. Once this gas comes to the hydrate stability zone, it becomes a hydrate, but it's only for a certain period of time. It is a reservoir to temporarily preserve certain amount of any type of methane. The depth of the water column is very important because the water is where methane oxidizes. The shallower the water column, the less time is required to this methane to pass by through the water column and escape to the atmosphere, as compared to the mean depth of the world ocean, which is few hundred meters up to kilometers. The East Siberian Arctic shelf mean depth is only 50 meters. The ice coverage prevents water from mixing, in terms of wind mixing, because it's just coverage, ice coverage. The loss of ice coverage, of course, leads to accessibility of water, of surface of the water by wind. And when there is no wind, the emission happens. How emission happens? So the methane molecule escapes from the sea surface to the atmosphere. Of course, when the wind mixes the water column, so all the methane, entire inventory, so all the methane which is included within the water column escapes to the atmosphere. So it helps the methane inventory to escape, actually. The deeper the mixing, the more methane, the more fraction of methane escapes to the atmosphere. This particular sediment layer, which is 53 meters, doesn't seal this methane escaping from the seabed deposits any longer. It provides us with gas migration pathways. This is what is significance of this. There is a potential risk that if warming continues, the larger, maybe great and massive amount of methane could be released from this Siberian Arctic shelf. Of course, there is a potential risk. And in terms of potential risk, I would say that this Siberian Arctic shelf is the most potential because, as we said, the carbon pool is huge and the water shallow is very shallow, and the warming occurs stronger than in different areas of the world ocean. And of course, it is a potential risk. So the methane in the atmosphere, the total amount of methane in the atmosphere, in the current atmosphere, it's about 5 gigatons. The amount of carbon preserved in form of methane in this Siberian Arctic shelf is approximately from hundreds to thousands of gigatons. And of course, it's only 1% of that amount is required to double the atmospheric burden of methane. But to destabilize 1% of this carbon pool, I think it's not much effort needed, considering that the state of permafrost and the amount of methane currently involved. Because what divides this methane from the atmosphere is a very shallow water column and a weakening permafrost, which is losing its ability to seal, to serve as a seal. And this is, I think it's not a matter of thousands of years, it's a matter of decades, I think. Maybe at most 100 years, but I think a matter of decades. It might potentially happen because just because this area is very seismically and tectonically active, and there was some investigation that the tectonic activity is increasing, and the seismic activity is, what is seismic activity? Is destabilization of this grounds. It's just mechanical forcing destabilization. So it's additional pathways for this methane to be escaped. And many factors, I would list you many factors that might, that are very convenient and convincing for us, so that might happen. Not any time. I think any time sounds like it might happen today, it might happen tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. You think so?
I'm impressed.
Igor is a very convinced person because he spent a lot of time over there. And if, for example, a few years ago we could reach the certain sites from the fast ice. Fast ice is annual ice, and we can reach quite easily to certain sites, hundreds or tens of kilometers from the coast. But last 2 years we couldn't do that because the ice was broken. It was polynias, it was brines, it was leads. So that means that, and where the sea ice should be about 2 meters thick, it was 40 centimeters thick. That means that the processes, all the processes that serve destabilization of everything, of the sea ice, of the water column, of the currents increasing, the currents, I mean the movement of water beneath the sea ice increased. So everything looks anomalous, even from our experience from this 10 years. Everything looks anomalous, and this is what makes him thinking that, making him think that the worst thing might happen.
No, we cannot exclude this. Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's less, but we cannot exclude because...
Shortly speaking, we do not like what we see there. absolutely do not like.
So they do not like what they see there, and Natalia, Dr. Natalia there is talking about the ice on the Arctic shelf. Okay. The ice on the Arctic shelf around Siberia, the ice is retreating, the methane is releasing, and we're talking about releases by the gigaton. Okay, so if we go back to Gary Houser's article, historic killer methane could erupt from Arctic, and he's basing his article partly on the findings of the Russian scientists, of their work, because this was published in 2013. They explained what was happening in 2012. Historic killer methane could erupt from Arctic, the severity of the threat and the tragic moral failure to address it. So, as she's explained, we're talking 1,850 billion metric tons of it. In comparison, 350 billion metric tons of carbon have been emitted since 1850. So, you know, that is a huge amount, and if it did suddenly break through, then, you know, you are talking major catastrophe. It has the potential to destroy all human life on Earth, and in effect murder the future. Willfully caused extinction is a crime that has no name. That's from David Orr. Now, that is the way it is working. It isn't the CO2 that is heating our climate up. It is the methane that is heating our climate up. And also, methane is produced by the petrochemical industry. It produces methane as well. But as I say, the biggest problem right now is animal farming, and it's a big industry. Now, in this video, which I've shared here, I'm not going to play it, I've put an alert to the World Bank, and in that video I'll leave a link to it under this one. It's more or less saying the same thing, but I'm offering guidance basically to the people with money in this world, who hopefully will wake up to their humanity and start, you know, acting with some sense and take responsibility to do something. Because you know, I've explained that, you know, they do have to invest now, because if you're going to stop, drastically cut meat consumption, all the people presently employed in that, who are producing that, they are going to need subsidising. They're going to need investing in to, you know, move into more ecologically friendly activities. Geological records point to the destructive power of methane. Right, so this is the potential that Natalia, Dr. Natalia, was talking about there, okay? Although carbon dioxide persists much longer in the atmosphere, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change states that methane is a full 72 times more powerful during its first 20 years. In fact, in the first year, and I'll show this to you in a bit, it's 100 times more powerful in the first year that it gets into the atmosphere. And what we're talking about powerful here is, you know, warming up the climate. And it doesn't really need much of a degrees to start melting the permafrost. And already it is melting, as Natalia explained. It is the prevailing view of the scientific community that earlier major releases of this gas resulted in the most catastrophic wipeouts of life in planetary history. Two critically important British documentaries explore the scientific inquiry linking methane to both the Permian and the PETM mass extinction events. Etched into layers of rock is the record of the Permian extinction event, the most complete decimation of life known to science. Now, we know from our genetic history that we went through a bottleneck process where it seems that there was only one woman and a few men left alive. It is believed that a staggering 90% of the life forms on Earth simply disappeared. Now the thing is that if this methane did come, and it would kill all of us, because you know, you're talking massive amounts, then will life ever actually return on Earth? Because if we did all suddenly drop dead from methane, massive inputs of methane into the atmosphere, then what, we're leaving all these nuclear power plants running. And that's why I've said very clearly that we need to shut, every single nuclear power plant needs to be shut down immediately. Scientific opinion, also based on the geological record, is that a tremendous series of volcanic eruptions in Siberia released enough carbon dioxide to drive Earth's temperature up 5 degrees centigrade. This radical increase then warmed the world's oceans enough to thaw previously frozen methane. Evidence points to the heat from this super global warming gas driving temperatures up another 5 degrees and causing the horrific wipeout. How severe is the current threat? Numerous, quite authoritative and political neutral sources such as the World Bank and the International Energy Agency, IEA, are now in agreement that if global carbon emissions are not dramatically reduced very quickly, the planet will be seeing temperature increases of 5 degrees C or more by the latter part of this century. Such a human-generated increase could very well take the place of the volcanic eruptions in Siberia and could set the stage for a potential mass release of ancient methane. So, you know, we are talking about a very, very serious issue. Methane emissions from seabeds paralleled by land-based permafrost releasing carbon. And we're talking about the methane being released now from the shallow Arctic seabeds that, again, not Dr. Natalia was talking about, they found outlets. And I do take this very seriously because, as I've mentioned in one of my other videos many years ago, I had a dream that the water had come rushing in to the land. All the land around my house was just water, sea. And suddenly out of the sea sprung huge fountains, were just bursting, boom, 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 out of the sea. And years later I saw exactly that scene that was showing methane explosions in the sea, what they would look like. And that's exactly what they were. Big, huge fountains were boom, boom, boom. So, you know, I do take this seriously, because I tell you, I've had a lot of my dreams have come true, or they have proven to be warnings. And the whole point of having a prophetic dream is to take note of it, you know, so that you take steps, like the Pharaoh did with the 7 fat cows and the 7 thin cows. Once he understood what his dream meant, he went and made sure that he had a good grain store for when the famine hit. Now, the only thing that we can do to protect ourselves from this is to immediately all stop eating meat, or drastically cut our meat and dairy consumption. Like I say, I've been vegan for 25 years. It's a healthy way to live. I don't miss meat. I don't crave for it. It was a decision I made out of compassion. And, you know, the actual truth is, these creatures are living horrible lives. They die in terror. They're being tortured. You know, the meat industry is a brutal, inhumane thing. You know, if people could see what happens to these animals, there's just the horrific things that are being done to them before they die. You know, you're talking pigs being dumped alive into boiling hot scalding water, and chickens. Okay, I won't go on any further. Now, this was written in 2015 by Andy Rybacek, and again, he is concentrating on animal agriculture. He's vastly underestimated because of calculation parameters in this thought-provoking essay. But it isn't because of calculation parameters. It really is because the meat industry is a very powerful body, and anything that potentially threatens their profits is silenced and oppressed. And that's why, you know, the shock UN warning does not include methane. You know, they all focus on the gnat, as I've said. They swallow the camel, they strain at the gnat. CO2 is a gnat. Because the fact is that everybody could carry on using the cars and doing all the things they're doing if they just stopped eating meat. So, here's what Andy has to say. Most reading this article are probably aware of the animal cruelty issues surrounding the livestock industry, the significant contribution to water and air pollution, and the strain on water, land, energy resources. Because people don't realise that cattle actually eat more grain than people. But few people likely think of livestock in the context of global warming and climate change. We should. It is important that cultured meat proponents are able to refer interested parties to the full breadth of the factory farming industry's environmental impact, including and especially its significant contribution to climate change and global warming. And, you know, conversely, in livestock and climate change, environmental assessment experts at the World Bank found the industry is actually responsible for a staggering 51% of global GHG emissions. By way of comparison, even 18% is more than the entire transportation sector's emissions. But which figure is more accurate? Because they're saying, you know, the Food and Agriculture Organisation are saying it contributes 18% of the world's greenhouse gas, which they would, wouldn't they? Getting to the meat of the matter, the livestock industry and greenhouse gas emissions. This article reveals how the FAO obfuscates and trivialises livestock's impact on global warming, and why the industry almost certainly does account for half the world's climate change driving GHG emissions. So, you know, basically, it's 51%. As an initial matter, it is worth noting the widely disparate World Bank and FAO estimates do not represent a mere he said, she said, or proper battle of the experts. The World Bank authors of LCC are both environmental assessment experts, while not a single FAO author of LS is an environmental assessment expert. This, of course, then violates international environmental assessment's best practices for projects which have a significant environmental impact, like global livestock and feed production. In fact, for committing an elementary error in environmental assessment, a portion of LS was forced to be retracted. Defences of the FAO's report in light of the World Bank's 51% figure have been shoddy and only furthered scepticism towards the FAO estimates. In LLC, the World Bank posited that there were some 50 billion livestock animals worldwide, while the FAO in LS used a figure of only 20.7 billion, despite the fact that other reports within the FAO itself had suggested the number was much higher, and other governmental agencies had estimated the number at around 50 billion. Soon after publication of the LS, the FAO effectively conceded 21.7 billion was erroneous, when their own website listed the number at 56 billion, a figure 258% greater than used in LS and 10% greater than used in LCC. More recent estimates suggest that the planet currently homes 70 billion livestock animals. 70 billion. Okay, so that means there's roughly 7 cows, okay, for every person on the planet. As a brief aside, global meat demands are only rising. A 2013 FAO report suggests livestock demand is expected to increase 70% by 2050. Well, I can tell you right now, it's very unlikely we're going to be here by 2050. We'll be very lucky if people are still alive. Yet, the FAO does not address alternative means of satisfying growing protein needs, and thus eschews an essential task of environmental impact assessments, the consideration of alternatives, but only recommends greater livestock intensity. Yes, well, they would, wouldn't they? The FAO does suggest the livestock sector can potentially curb GHG emissions by 30% through better practice in technology, but this claim is dubious, given livestock specialists have typically only found room for a 10% reduction. So at most, you're only going to get a 10% if they try as hard as possible. Okay. Now, you've already explained about the potential global warming. Of how, you know, methane is an extremely potent GHG gas. Per figures used in LS and LCC respectively, ton for ton, methane contributes to global warming 23 times more than CO2 when viewed over a 100-year time frame, and 72 times more over a 20-year time frame. Because methane stays in the atmosphere for only 12 years, whereas CO2 lingers for over 100. Importantly, after publication of both LS and LCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change adjusted methane's GWP values over a 10 to 20 and 100 timeline to 106, 86 and 34. Others give values even higher still. Thus, for using outdated GWP values for methane, both LS and LACC estimates of livestock's contribution to global warming are conservative in this respect. So, you know, the 51% figure is actually conservative. Because, you know, the truth is that in the first year, methane is 100 times more warming in the atmosphere than that's in the first year. But the thing is, it doesn't stay in the atmosphere for as long, and that's the good thing about it, you know. So what is happening, what is being explained here, is that the meat industry is producing massive amounts of methane, which is massively contributing to global warming, many times more than, you know, like I say, if America cut its meat consumption by half, it would be as if every single mode of transport in America had been garaged. That's just by cutting the meat by half. But we need to be more drastic than that. We need to actually, I would say, a quarter, I would say, you know, by 3/4. Cut 3/4 of your meat consumption out. Reduce your meat consumption to 1/4. Or, better still, go vegan. Because going vegetarian isn't enough. Because, you know, these vegetarians call themselves vegetarians. They still eat cheese and milk. That isn't good enough. Vegetarian isn't good enough. We're talking all meat and dairy products. And that is what we are going to have to do, because we are going to have to get real about this. So, you know, that is why I'm asking again, I'm asking James Corbett, please wake up, you know, look behind the headlines. They're being restricted. There's a lot of money interests that don't want people to know the truth. They will keep us buying and buying and buying till the very end. They don't believe in anything except what's in their wallet. Okay. So it's a very serious issue. This commentary does not dwell on doomsday rhetoric, but humanity is teetering much closer to oblivion than what has been getting through in the shallow coverage offered by mass media, and there is a moral imperative to issue a warning. Mass extinction, especially self-imposed, is not a pretty concept, and the use of a few graphic images is necessary to both convey a reality that may be forcing itself upon us and to penetrate the shield of denial. The voices of scientists pressing on this front deserve to be amplified. Their observations and concerns are presented to the reader, who is invited to evaluate whether any alarm is justified. Humanity is standing on the very edge of a cliff, and if we fall off it, it will be a one-way ticket to hell. Despite the looming shadow cast by this danger, it has yet to make its way into public consciousness. Even the worldwide environmental movement has continued to focus on human-generated emission of global warming gases and has not grasped the dire implications of the accelerated catastrophe which could ensue if nature's own stockpile becomes activated. An immense storehouse containing far more carbon than humans have generated since the onset of the industrial age. Though the sweeping scale of this existential threat, combined with its potential irreversibility once triggered, may be leading us to a psychological denial, the reality of the danger compels humanity to take all precaution and spare no expense in both understanding and reducing it. Yet the responses so far speaks to an unspeakably tragic moral collapse. Every single segment of our society that should be either sounding the alarm or taking definitive action to prevent this global catastrophe is presently looking the other way. This commentary examines such failure in part 2, but first explores the nature and magnitude of the danger itself. And as we've said, it's a very serious issue. Now, we have an ethical duty to address this, because this will be our fault. Okay, this won't be a natural disaster. It is a disaster that we have created and that we have the power right now to prevent. And, you know, as I'm saying, this needs to be taken very, very, very seriously. Yes, it's easy for people that do not understand the true issue here to dismiss, oh yeah, we all know CO2, it's not going to do anything. It isn't going to warm the planet up. You know, no, CO2 is not the problem, is it? It is the intense CO2 of methane, which in its first couple of years is 72 more times, has more, 72 times more unit per unit, more powerful, has more powerful impact on climate than regular CO2. And what can I say? I can't all I can say is go vegan. That's the best thing. If you really care about the planet, if you really love your child, go vegan. Or at the very least, you cut down your meat consumption by 3/4. Okay, so you eat a quarter of the meat and dairy of what you're eating now. And everybody who cares about life, who cares about the future, who cares about our planet, who cares about the children, that is what we need to do. And we need to do it. Really, we should have done it yesterday. But we do need to do it today. And we need to do it this year. And we need to get the message out. So please, James Corbett and everybody listening, I'll leave you the links. Check it out for yourself. understand the reality, the seriousness of what we're facing here. Do not take this information with a pinch of salt and, oh, it's just some, you know. No, I've shown you valid scientific evidence, even from the World Bank, okay, which obviously they've kept very quiet about it all, haven't they? But it's up to us, isn't it? Because that's why we've got this internet, we're learning for ourselves, we're doing the research, we're finding out the facts, we're sharing them. Why are we doing that? Are we doing that because, you know, we're all trying to make a name for ourselves and have our 5 minutes bit of fame and, you know, beg for funding? No. A core percentage of people like myself who are out there, and who I think, you know, hopefully James Corbett is one, because really I'm having difficulty at the moment working out who's the shills and who isn't. But the reason why we're doing this is, and sharing information, why? Is to enhance life, to help people become aware, to guide people, to show, well, what can we do? Here's a problem. How did this problem come about? How can we fix it? Okay? Well, this problem has come about with methane. How do we fix it? You stop eating meat. The dairy industry, the meat and dairy industry just needs to be decimated. All that pain and suffering that humanity has been inflicting on life continuously, it just needs to end. It needs to stop. It's having a terrible effect on our consciousness anyway, on the consciousness of our planet. All those millions of animals going through fear and terror and suffering every single year. It is not having a positive impact, regardless of the threat to our whole planet, to all the life of our planet, you know. And that was why I was so angry in the first video I made. I was extremely angry because, you know, I've been vegan for 25 years because I couldn't tolerate, once I understood, you know, I just could not tolerate the suffering that I realised the meat and dairy industry was inflicting. I felt I could not be part of it. And then to find out 25 years later, you know, after everybody had told me I was going to die, and to find out that no, actually this whole industry is now, all that horror is now actually going to, is threatening, you know, a mass extinction event. So it really, really, really is time to get very, very, very real. And, you know, I implore James Corbett and everybody of the same ilk and the public to please, please understand that this issue is not going to go away. And the UN, you know, Christina Figueri, she is correct when she says we've got 3 years. I mean, I don't think we've got 3 years. I think maybe 1 or 2 years. That's what we should be thinking on those lines. That after 1 or 2 years, we've reached the point of no return. Because once it reaches a certain point, and don't forget this stuff hangs around in the air for 12 years. Once we've reached the tipping point, that's it. There's nothing we can do to stop it. And this methane gas, it will be released in huge amounts. So, and as I say, the methane that's produced from the cattle industry is warming. It's having the effect of warming the climate up, that then warms the Siberian Arctic shelf up, that then releases more methane. It's like, again, Jesus said it, didn't he? To those who have, more shall be given. Oh, you have methane. Now you're going to get even more methane. To those who have less, even that which they have shall be taken away. Oh, we're having less and less oxygen on Earth. Oh, so even that little bit of oxygen we have left shall be taken away. So it's a very, it is a wake-up call. It is a wake-up call. And it's, in a way, hopefully, it is good news in the sense that people now will start getting human and intelligent and responsible, taking responsibility. It's not our fault that we've all been born into this crazy consciousness, antiquated consciousness. But it is our responsibility now to recognise where action needs to be taken immediately. So, thank you for taking the time to listen. Please share, please talk to other people about it, check the links. Please do not ignore this.